Friends and fans of American Pickers star Frank Fritz gathered to honor his legacy in a very special way. KWQC's Wafa Ezit takes us to the dedication in Savannah, Illinois, where Fritz's spirit is alive and well.
Fans thought they knew Frank Fritz from years of hunting hidden treasures on television, but nothing prepared them for what was discovered inside his quiet garage. When the doors finally rolled open, witnesses describe a scene frozen in time, packed with rare relics, deeply personal artifacts, and clues to struggles few ever saw. Some items sparked awe, others heartbreak, and a few unsettling questions about his final years. So, what secrets had he been quietly guarding? And why did this discovery leave everyone utterly speechless across America and beyond today? The strange vehicle that didn't belong to any era. In the quiet closing chapter of his life, when the noise of fame had finally faded and the glow of television lights no longer followed him home, Frank made a choice that puzzled everyone who still paid attention. He stepped out of public sight without ceremony. No farewell interview, no final appearance. He simply withdrew, like a man turning down the volume on a world that had grown too loud. It was during this period, when his days slowed and his nights grew longer, that Frank acquired one last vehicle. This one was not impressive in any ordinary sense. It didn't shine beneath the sun or rumble with confidence when it moved. It didn't announce itself with power or polish. In fact, it did the opposite. It seemed to resist attention, as though it preferred not to be seen at all. At first glance, it felt unsettling. Its shape was unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable to look at. It didn't fit neatly into any known era. It wasn't clearly old, but it wasn't modern either. The lines were strange, too soft in some places, too sharp in others, as if several ideas had been stitched together and then abandoned halfway through. There were no badges to explain it, no logos to claim it, no markings to suggest who had built it or why. The paint told its own quiet story. It was faded and uneven, worn thin in places and oddly preserved in others. Not chipped in the usual way, but smoothed down mirrors, like something that had endured years of gentle handling rather than rough use. It looked as though time itself had tried to erase it, only to lose patience and give up. Frank didn't talk about the vehicle. He didn't show it off. He didn't invite anyone to examine it more closely. When it arrived, there was no announcement, no excitement. Just the low sound of tires on concrete as he guided it slowly into his garage, his movements careful, almost respectful. That was when the neighbors saw him. They had lived beside Frank for years, long enough to grow used to his privacy and his routines. Still, curiosity won out. As Frank eased the strange vehicle into the dimness of the garage, the neighbor paused, watching with a mixture of confusion and interest. Finally, unable to hold it in, they asked the simple question anyone would ask. "What is that thing?" Frank stopped. For a moment, he stood very still, his hand resting lightly on the frame of the vehicle. His expression didn't shift into a smile or a frown. Instead, it softened, like someone remembering a story they weren't sure they were allowed to tell. He didn't look at the neighbor right away. His eyes lingered on the vehicle, tracing its unfamiliar shape, as though confirming something only he could see. Then he spoke. "It's older than you think." 5 words, no explanation, no follow-up. Before the neighbor could ask anything else, Frank straightened, rolled the vehicle fully inside, and gently closed the garage door. The sound echoed down the quiet street, final and unmistakable. After that, nothing. Days passed, then weeks, then years. The garage door stayed closed more often than not. When it did open, There was no sign of the vehicle inside, only shadows and the ordinary clutter of storage. No one ever saw Frank driving it. No one heard it start. No one caught a glimpse of it in motion. Some neighbors convinced themselves it had never been real at all, just an odd illusion created by bad lighting and fading memory. Others whispered theories. Maybe it was a prototype. Maybe a forgotten experiment. Maybe something borrowed and returned under cover of silence. Frank never corrected anyone. He lived quietly until the end, his routines simple, his world small. And when he passed, his belongings were sorted, his house emptied, his life reduced to the usual pieces left behind. But the vehicle? It was gone. No records, no paperwork, no evidence it had ever existed. The garage was empty, clean, untouched, like nothing unusual had ever been stored there at all. And yet, some nights, when the street is quiet and the air feels heavy with memory, a few neighbors still swear they hear something faint. Not an engine, not a roar, just the soft sound of something moving slowly through time, older than anyone thinks. What was found in Frank Fritz's garage? Was anyone expecting what they found? Let's delve into the details of the discovery that caught even the specialists unawares. The discovery that shocked experts and raised alarms. After Frank passed away, the law stepped in, as it always does. His belongings had to be counted, recorded, and sorted. Every room of his quiet house was inspected. Drawers were opened. Shelves were checked. Papers were stacked and labeled. But the last place on the list, the old garage behind the house, had been locked for years. By order of the court, the seal was finally broken. The metal door groaned as it lifted, releasing a breath of dust and stale air, as if the room itself had been holding its silence for decades. Light spilled inside, revealing not chaos, but order. Careful, deliberate order. 8 cars sat inside. They were arranged almost like a display, not shoved away or forgotten. At the front were cars any collector would recognize, polished classics, lovingly maintained, each one a testament to time and care. Their chrome still gleamed. Their tires were clean. These were not abandoned machines. They were honored ones. Yet something about the room felt unfinished. At the far back of the garage, partially hidden in shadow, sat a 9th shape, or rather, something that didn't quite belong with the others. It was covered by a gray tarp, stained with age and darkened by oil and dust. Unlike the other cars, this one was turned slightly inward, as if it had been placed there with intention, waiting. The investigators hesitated before pulling the cover away. When they finally did, the air changed. The car beneath looked like a Corvette at first glance, but only at first glance. It sat much lower to the ground. Its body was wider, sharper, more muscular. The curves were familiar, yet somehow wrong, as though someone had taken a known idea and pushed it beyond its limits. This wasn't a showroom car, this was an experiment. The fiberglass body showed signs of handwork, uneven lines, subtle changes, choices made by someone testing ideas rather than following plans. It looked fast, even while standing still, like it was meant to challenge something. Officials searched for the vehicle identification number, the VIN that every legal car must have. They checked the usual places. They checked again. There was nothing. Instead, bolted to the firewall was a small brass plate, dull with age but still firmly attached. Numbers were stamped into it, numbers that led nowhere. They matched no database, no manufacturer, no known registry. Below the numbers were 3 simple words, etched cleanly and clearly. Experimental use only. No one spoke. A vintage racing expert was called in, someone who had spent a lifetime studying rare cars and forgotten designs. He moved slowly around the vehicle, crouching, standing, running his hand just above the surface without touching. He studied the suspension, the frame, the details only a true expert would notice. After a long silence, he finally straightened up. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "This looks like a 1963 Grand Sport Corvette." The room froze. That couldn't be right. It wasn't right. Only 5 Grand Sport Corvettes were ever built. Their history was well known. Every one of them had been tracked, documented, photographed, and studied. Their owners were known. Their locations were known. There was no missing one. So what was sitting in Frank's garage? Was it a lost prototype, hidden before records were finalized? A secret 6th car, built quietly and never acknowledged? A test vehicle, a mule, never meant to survive beyond experimentation? Or was it the most convincing replica ever created, built not for fame or profit, but for reasons no one could yet explain? As questions piled up, investigators began searching the garage more carefully. Drawers were opened. Cabinets were emptied. Tools were laid out neatly, worn but cared for. Above the workbench, taped to the wall, was a single sheet of paper. The edges were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. It was written by hand, steady and deliberate. The note read, "I left behind everything there." No date, no explanation. In that moment, the garage changed. It was no longer just a place where cars were stored. It was no longer an estate to be catalogued or a collection to be sold. It felt intentional, almost like a confession or a challenge. Frank hadn't simply left possessions behind, he had left a story. The cars, the mystery, the hidden machine at the back of the room, they weren't random. They were placed, arranged, preserved. And the garage itself was no longer just a garage. It was a message, waiting patiently for someone to finally open the door and realize that Frank had been saying something all along. Why was everyone caught unawares by the discovery? Does it reflect something about Frank Fritz's personality? Let's dive into the details of who Frank Fritz was known to be. The man who didn't just collect. He rescued history. When Frank Fritz passed away, fans of American pickers felt a kind of loss that was hard to explain. It wasn't the loud, dramatic kind of grief people feel when a flashy star disappears. It was quieter. He felt like someone you had known for years, someone who had been sitting in the background of your living room, week after week, doing honest work with calm hands and a steady heart. Frank was never the type to demand attention. He didn't speak in big speeches or chase the spotlight. Instead, he showed up as himself, patient, curious, and deeply respectful of the past. Something was grounding about him. You trusted him without really knowing why. Maybe it was because he listened more than he talked, or because he treated forgotten objects with the same care others reserve for treasures locked behind glass. Meaning, to him, an old rusted bike wasn't just a bike. It was a piece of history, a relic of a time long gone. He saw the potential in it, the story it could tell. He was searching for a deeper meaning, a connection to the past. He was searching for a purpose, a reason to keep going. He was searching for a reason to live meaning. To him, an old rusted bike wasn't trash. It was someone's childhood. A broken engine wasn't useless. It was proof of hands that once worked hard, dreams that once moved forward, lives that once depended on it. While many people saw junk piles and walked past them without a second glance, Frank stopped. He bent down. He asked questions. He wondered who had owned the item, what problem it once solved, and why it had been left behind. In a world obsessed with the new and shiny, Frank was drawn to what had been forgotten. He believed the past deserved patience. On screen, viewers caught glimpses of this mindset. They saw his excitement when he found something unusual, his careful touch as he lifted fragile items, and his quiet joy when a piece of history was rescued from decay. But what the camera couldn't fully show was how deeply he believed in what he was doing. This wasn't a job to him, it was a calling. To him, every old object had a purpose. To him, every old object had a purpose that once mattered greatly to someone. Saving those items wasn't about owning them or selling them. It was about honoring the people and stories attached to them. Frank often acted as though he was a caretaker rather than a collector. He felt a responsibility to protect these pieces of history from being erased. He understood that once something is gone, it can never fully be replaced. That belief shaped how he lived and how he worked. It guided his choices, his patience, and even his silences. Not because he was stuck in the past, but because he believed the past still had lessons to teach. He reminded people that progress doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. In many ways, Frank himself became like the objects he loved. He was steady, unpolished, and deeply human. He didn't try to reinvent himself for applause. He stayed true to what mattered to him, even when that meant being misunderstood or overlooked. And perhaps that is why his passing feels so heavy. People didn't just lose a television personality, they lost a reminder that value is not always loud, that meaning is often hidden beneath rust, and that some of the most important work happens quietly, far from applause. In the end, Frank carried something with him that few people ever knew about fully. A belief, a truth, a quiet secret shaped by years of listening to forgotten stories and rescuing abandoned pieces of history. It was a secret rooted in responsibility, memory, and care. And like the objects he loved most, it was something precious, meant to be discovered slowly and never taken for granted. What seems odd about the mysterious garage that housed the strange vehicle? Is there more to the garage than the mysterious vehicle? Let's find out. The Iowa garage that was never meant to be public. Tucked far from the noise of crowds and cameras, somewhere in the quiet stretches of Iowa, stood Frank Fritz's private garage. It was not a place meant to impress visitors or chase admiration. Very few people were ever invited inside, and even those who entered rarely grasped what it truly meant. This garage was not designed to shine. There were no bright lights aimed at perfect angles, no polished floors, no signs explaining what to admire. What lived there did not need decoration. The space was plain, calm, and deeply sincere, much like Frank himself. The moment one stepped inside, it became clear this was not a showroom. Showrooms are built to sell dreams. This garage was built to protect memories. The air carried the faint scent of oil, old leather, and time itself. Tools rested where they were last used, not arranged for display. Dust was not an enemy here. It was a witness. Every corner told a quiet story of patience, care, and respect for things the modern world often rushes past. The vehicles inside were not chosen to show wealth or status. They were chosen because they spoke to Frank. Each car felt like a chapter from a long and thoughtful book. There was a turquoise 1956 Chevrolet Bel Air, its smooth curves flowing like a memory from another age. It did not shout for attention, yet it was impossible to ignore. Nearby sat a 1967 Ford Fairlane GT390, a car Frank restored himself piece by piece with steady hands and stubborn dedication. Every bolt, every panel, every sound of its engine carried the mark of his effort. It was not just a car, it was proof of patience. Then there was the long, graceful Cadillac Fleetwood, wide and dignified, a reminder of a time when American luxury was about comfort, presence, and confidence rather than speed alone. It stood quietly, like an elder who had seen much and demanded no praise. Around it were rarer finds, early cycle cars with fragile frames, unusual sports cars that once turned heads on forgotten roads, and elegant European machines that brought foreign stories into a Midwestern space. None of them was there because of their market value. They were there because they mattered. Frank knew every single one of them intimately. He could tell you where each car came from, who owned it before, and how it survived long enough to find its way to him. He remembered the barns they were pulled from, the families that once relied on them, and the years they spent neglected or forgotten. To Frank, these details were not trivia. They were the heart of the object. A car without a story was just metal. A car with a story was alive. What made Frank different from many collectors was his purpose. He did not collect to impress. He did not collect to compete. He collected to preserve. He believed that old things deserved dignity, not just value. In a world that constantly replaces rather than repairs, Frank chose to slow down and save. He saw beauty in wear, meaning in rust, and truth in imperfection. Those close to him often said Frank could vanish into that garage for hours at a time. Sometimes he worked, cleaning a part, adjusting an engine, fixing what time had broken. Other times, he did nothing at all. He would sit quietly, leaning against a workbench or resting on an old stool, simply being present. For him, the garage was not just a workspace. It was a refuge. Outside those walls, the world demanded noise. It demanded constant updates, pictures, opinions, and proof of relevance. Inside the garage, none of that mattered. Frank did not feel the need to explain or broadcast what he loved. He did not measure worth by likes or attention. His joy was private, steady, and deeply personal. By choosing privacy, Frank protected something fragile. He protected the quiet relationship between a person and the things they care for. He allowed forgotten objects to exist without pressure, without performance. In doing so, he gave them something rare in modern life: respect. That garage in Iowa was more than a storage space. It was a small act of resistance against a culture that moves too fast and discards too easily. It was a reminder that some treasures are not meant to be displayed, but understood. And in that quiet, honest space, surrounded by machines that once mattered and mattered again, Frank Fritz preserved not just history, but dignity. The discovery was an aftermath of Frank Fritz's death. When did he die? What caused his death? What was his final journey like? Let's leap over the details of the cause of Frank Fritz's death and the kind of life he lived. The final journey of Frank Fritz. Of cerebral infarction, a medical term of cerebral infarction, a medical term that essentially means he suffered lingering effects from a previous stroke caused by cerebral vascular disease. In addition, Fritz had been living with aortic stenosis, a chronic heart condition that makes it difficult for blood to flow efficiently through the body. Both of these health challenges were identified as contributing factors in his untimely passing. The news of Fritz's death was confirmed by his longtime friend and former co-host Mike Wolf on Instagram on Tuesday, October 1st. Wolf revealed that Fritz had died the day before, Monday, September 30th, at the age of 60. In a heartfelt tribute, Wolf remembered Fritz as a dreamer, a man of rare sensitivity, sharp humor, and unwavering authenticity. He painted a vivid picture of their years together, recalling the countless miles they traveled across the country in a white cargo van. Unaware that their adventures among dusty barns and cluttered garages would one day capture the imagination of millions of viewers. Fritz and Wolf first became household names through their hit show, American Pickers, a series that followed their journeys across the United States in search of hidden treasures tucked away in barns, garages, and junkyards. The duo's dynamic, Fritz's keen eye for antiques paired with Wolf's enthusiasm and charm, made them a captivating team. Fritz's final episode aired in March 2020, and it wasn't until July 2021 that his official departure from the show was confirmed. Their partnership, both on-screen and off, had its share of challenges, including periods of tension and distance. Yet, over time, the two reconciled, their friendship resilient despite the ups and downs of public life. Wolf also shared that Fritz had suffered another stroke in 2022, a health struggle that marked the final chapter of his life. In a poignant revelation, Wolf disclosed that he was by Fritz's side during his last moments, a testament to the deep bond they shared over decades of friendship, laughter, and shared adventures. Adding to the tributes, Fritz's manager, Bill Stanky, spoke to People magazine, describing Fritz as an extraordinary human being who possessed a profound love for life and people. Stanky highlighted Fritz's encyclopedic knowledge of Americana and antiques, noting that he was not just a co-host, but the anchor of American Pickers. His presence, Stanky emphasized, touched the lives of friends, family, and fans alike, leaving a void that will be deeply felt. Fritz's life, though cut short, was marked by curiosity, passion, and an unyielding zest for discovery. Beyond the cameras and the fame, he was a man who cherished genuine connections and approached life with warmth and humor. His ability to find beauty and value in forgotten objects reflected a deeper philosophy, a respect for history, for stories, and for the people behind them. Whether rifling through a dusty trunk or examining a time-worn tool, Fritz brought a sense of wonder and excitement that was uniquely his own. The legacy he leaves behind is multifaceted. Fans of American Pickers will remember him for his expertise, his quick wit, and the joy he brought to their screens. Friends and colleagues will remember his generosity of spirit, his thoughtfulness, and the quiet depth that lay beneath his sometimes playful exterior. Even in moments of struggle, Fritz's humor and authenticity shone through, endearing him to everyone he encountered. As tributes pour in, it is clear that Frank Fritz's impact reaches far beyond television. He was a collector of stories, a seeker of hidden treasures, and above all, a man whose heart was as vast as the country he traveled. While his passing leaves a profound sense of loss, the memories he created, filled with laughter, discovery, and heartfelt friendship, will continue to inspire and entertain for years to come. Frank Fritz may have left this world at 60, but the footprints of his journey, the barns explored, the antiques discovered, and the friendships forged, will endure, reminding us all of the value of curiosity, the importance of genuine connection, and the joy of embracing life with passion and heart. What is that top secret that Frank Fritz wanted to take with him to his grave. Why would he want to keep it even after his death? Let's take a look at the strange secrets that Frank Fritz wanted to keep even after his death. The mystery. Frank Fritz chose to keep silent. Whispers spread like wildfire across the automotive world. Everyone wanted to know. Everyone had an opinion. But no one knew the full story. Some claimed Frank had acquired the car from a retired GM engineer, someone who had quietly held on to secrets from the factory floor for decades. Others pointed toward estate sales scattered across America's industrial heartland, suggesting the vehicle had slipped through the cracks during some forgotten auction. A few were certain it was a hidden test car, crafted in secrecy, tucked away and deliberately concealed from public view. And still, General Motors said nothing, not a whisper, not a clue. Their silence only made the mystery burn brighter, igniting wild speculation everywhere. Collectors grew frantic, willing to go to any lengths. Offers flooded in from all corners of the world, each more daring than the last. Museums, hungry for the kind of showpiece that could pull in crowds by the thousands, made audacious bids. One particularly bold buyer supposedly offered a blank check, an offer so extreme it felt almost unreal, yet somehow perfectly suited to a car wrapped in legend. But the estate stood firm, refusing every proposal. Unshakable, resolute. Their defiance only deepened the car's myth, making it more irresistible than ever. The car never moved. It remained untouched. Untouched by curiosity, untouched by greed. It sat, as if suspended in time, neither verified nor discredited. A phantom waiting quietly in the shadows. And Frank Fritz. He never uttered a word. For a man whose life was built on uncovering secrets, exposing rare finds, and sharing stories the world thought it would never see, this was the one thing he chose to protect. He held it close, close enough to feel its presence, but never close enough to show it. Perhaps he understood a truth many collectors forget. Not every treasure is meant for an audience. Some things gain their power precisely because they are hidden. Whether that car was a lost grand sport, an experimental prototype, or something even stranger and unclassifiable, may never be known. Its identity remained a riddle, wrapped in layers of rumor and intrigue. And yet, in its mystery, it told a story, not of the car itself, but of the man who chose to keep it secret. Each piece not for its market value, but for its story, its history, and its quiet significance. To him, some treasures were meant to be cherished privately, like a sacred knowledge shared between the owner and the object itself. In a way, that untouched car became a symbol of Frank Fritz. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need a crowd to admire it. Its value wasn't in what it could fetch, but in the fact that it existed, and that someone had recognized its worth enough to protect it. The silence surrounding it became part of its aura, part of its mystique, and part of the legacy Frank left behind. When he passed, he left behind more than rare cars or high-dollar collectibles. He left behind a quiet question that lingers like a shadow. What was he really trying to tell us? Perhaps it was this: the greatest treasures are not those displayed in glass cases or written about in magazines. They are the ones we honor with patience, reverence, and secrecy. They are the things we preserve simply because they deserve it. And so, the car remains, unverified, unmoved, silent. Its story is incomplete, yet in that incompleteness lies its beauty. It reflects a man who understood that sometimes mystery itself is the ultimate luxury. Frank Fritz didn't collect for recognition. He didn't collect for status. He collected for understanding, for respect, for the quiet joy of knowing something few would ever see. And maybe, just maybe, the real treasure isn't the car at all, but the lesson it leaves behind, that some things are sacred precisely because they are hidden. What was Frank really trying to tell us? Perhaps the answer is not in revealing the car. Perhaps the answer is in embracing the silence. So, do you think Frank Fritz really wanted to keep the mystery even after his death? Would the discovery be worthwhile? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.